Hello, welcome to World Talks. I'm your host Adam Yasser. European leaders, including British Prime Minister Andy Burnham, have come to Kyiv to mark Ukraine's Independence Day and once again demonstrate solidarity with President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. This comes amid escalating problems for Ukraine as it faces Russian relentless attacks on cities, political tensions, and shortages of crucial anti-missile supplies from the West. To discuss the latest in Ukraine, we're joined by Chris York, news editor at Kyiv Post newspaper. Hello, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. I'm actually with Kyiv Independent, not Kyiv Post.
My apologies. Kyiv Independent. How would you describe Ukraine's situation at the moment? What are the key factors to take into account?
It's a tricky one. I mean, obviously, in a war, the front lines usually are where people look to see how that conflict is going and which side is coming out on top, or if it's a stalemate. But the front lines have been not moving for years now. And increasingly over the last few weeks in particular, the last couple of months, it's becoming an aerial war between Russia and Ukraine. And you mentioned there that we have a shortage of ballistic missile interceptors. And so on the Ukrainian side, we are getting bombed with, in these mass missile attacks in Kyiv and other cities, like every few days now. One of the best things about Western leaders coming for Independence Day is that it gives people in Kyiv a bit of respite, because Russia tends to not send missiles in when the British Prime Minister is in town. And then on the other side of it, the air war has escalated in the other direction. Ukraine's has had really big successes with its long-range drone strike campaign. We've seen all of these wild berries warehouses on fire. It's starting to really affect the Russian population. They're feeling the effects of the war, which they were never supposed to. It was supposed to be a quick war that would be over in days. And now it sort of looks like Ukraine has run out of wild berries targets and is now targeting another distribution, another online retailer, Ozone. And I think now 3 of their warehouses have been set ablaze in the last few days.
So you mentioned the visit by Western leaders, and you mentioned that it offers some respite. How does the Ukrainian society, how is the morale overall?
I mean, it's good in the context of, we're in 5 years, nearly 5 years into this war now. Like, everybody is very tired. Everyone is exhausted. You don't get much sleep on a nightly basis when there are missiles and warnings and air raid sirens going off a lot. But there's a baseline of no one is considering giving up to Russia. No one's thinking about capitulation. I hate to use this word resilience that gets bandied around. Everyone talks about the resilience of the Ukrainian people, but I have a bit of an issue with that word, because you choose to be resilient, and Ukrainians don't have a choice in this. They'd have to keep going, and they have to just keep plodding along, putting up with the hardships, and just hoping that Ukraine can again tip the tide of the war in Ukraine and put Russia under enough pressure somehow for it to end its war.
So there's no, let's say, peace party in Ukraine at the moment, and on this issue there is unity.
I think generally the polls that come out see a majority. I mean, there's not going to be 100% unity on anything. That's an unrealistic thing in any country on any topic. But the last polling that I saw was there was a vast majority of people didn't agree with giving up the rest of the Donbass to basically appease Russia. And that's, the Kremlin's stated goal is taking all of the Donbass. And so a majority of Ukrainians don't believe that Ukraine should do that. And I think the inference from that is that a majority of Ukrainians don't want to just give up and capitulate to Russia, allow them to take Donbass, which will inevitably give them just a platform to reconsolidate their armed forces and launch another war in a few years' time, with Ukraine in an even weaker position.
How would you describe pressure on Zelenskyy to actually settle or find a way of compromising with Russia or getting some kind of ceasefire, given that there's a number of important elections in Europe next year. He himself mentioned a window of opportunity sort of towards the spring of next year. And of course, you know, there is the French election, the Polish election, the Italian election, and at least in some of these countries, he may end up having less supportive governments in place. So is this creating some kind of pressure on him to find a solution?
It probably is, yeah. But I think there's a sort of a wider thing of just time in general creates a build-up of this pressure because, you know, like the wave of support that came out in favor of Ukraine in the immediate aftermath of the invasion in 2022, it's been slowly going down ever since. And that's a perfectly natural phenomena. People, even when they're not in the war zone itself, grow tired of the war. Resources are expended, and you know we're at the point now where the Ukraine's Western allies can't provide enough ballistic missile interceptors. You know that's just one part of what Ukraine needs to continue fighting this war, and it's just a question of resources. And I mean that's what Putin's always been trying to do for a long time now, is basically to outlast the West and the West's support for Ukraine. So I think, yeah, the political angle of it as well does add another sense of urgency to it. But that's not a new phenomenon necessarily. I think, you know, Ukraine wants to win this war and resolve it as soon as possible because then fewer people die, fewer cities get bombed. And the sooner it's over, the sooner Ukraine can go back to rebuilding and reconstruction. So, yeah, it will definitely be a factor, but that's a phenomenon that's been happening for a while, I think.
One delegation apparently is missing from Kyiv today. That is the Polish delegation. And it sort of reflects the sad state of affairs when it comes to bilateral relations between the two countries. Is this a wider problem for Ukraine of losing support of some of sort of staunchest allies?
Yeah, I mean, Ukraine needs as many countries on its side as it can, particularly in Europe and particularly countries that are on its border. And you know, there's a lot of issues between Ukraine and Poland right now. I think the Ukrainians that I speak to sort of see them as a bit of a not a sideshow in how important those issues are, but as a distraction from what should be happening, which is, you know, the building of those relationships, the strengthening of those relationships. And to go back to what I just said about, you know, relationships and patience and resources running out over time, keeping those good relations with Ukraine's neighbors, it becomes particularly more and more important.
Right. Final question, because we're running out of time. How is Ukraine preparing for winter? We know that winter can be particularly difficult for Ukraine. So what are the preparations?
I mean, I think the big one is trying to solve the issue of defending against ballistic missiles. And Zelenskyy had an off record with journalists over the meeting. We had a Kyiv Independent reporter there. And he said that one of the priorities, if we can't intercept ballistic missiles when they're being fired at the city, cities like Kyiv, then Ukraine needs to go after the launchers that are launching these missiles. And so I think on the military front, there is a lot of trying to prepare for that scenario whereby instead of having a situation where we are just undefended against ballistic missiles and they're just taking up power stations and electrical substations at will, Ukraine is actively trying to hunt down those missile launchers, but obviously they're on Russian territory,
right?
Which obviously makes it a little more difficult.
Chris, we have to finish here. Thank you very much for joining us, and apologies again for getting the name of your paper wrong at the beginning. All the best.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for watching, and stay with us for a news update.